but it's the grace of God that holds back his wrath. And that's because Christ satisfied God the Father with his payment. God is so good, and not just to us, but especially to us.
You are always only good.
I was not able to be in the last two sessions. I just want to get a comment before we start. Don't underestimate the power of prayer for the next generation. And I was called to preach under Pastor Will Senn, S-E-N-N, he's now in Colorado. But there was a season in our church in Clemson where three of us businessmen were called to preach, one after the other after the other. And it all went back. So when I called him one day and said, I just want you to know the Lord called me to preach last night, he didn't surprise me. I've been praying for that for 2 years. So he was a pastor that identified men, and he prayed. And he prayed. And three of us, boom, boom, boom. So it's very interesting, but that season all came from prayer. All righty. Thanks again. This is, I got 2 rough hours. I got right before lunch and I got right after lunch. So right now your rear end's are sore, you're tired, you're thinking about it, you just drove in last night. So again, as we go to this topic, common traits of healthy churches, just a couple things to start with. At any point you have a comment or a question, stop, let's discuss it, okay? At any point. I'd rather stop there. You have my notes. You can read it. Second thing, on this one, I've got a lot of podcasts listed that we've done. It is simply a resource, not the resource. You with me? Say, yes, I understand. It's simply okay. Because I don't ever want to come across as this is the only, no, this is a resource you can listen to. Okay, so I want to make sure that is very, very clear. And again, when I leave here, again, 2 words that I think in my pastoral life meant so much, and I've already said, when I'm pray, prepare. I'm going to pray and expect God to do something, but I'm going to prepare because I think God is going to do something. So whenever you're talking about anything in church life, evangelism, disciple making, finances, buildings, staffing, whatever, I'm going to pray as though I can do nothing, but I'm going to prepare because I think God is going to do something. Okay, does that make sense? So that's just two words I use. All right, here we go. Common traits of healthy churches. Again, I continue to try to update this as I'm in churches that seem to be, again, healthy. How are we defining healthy? Because I believe sound doctrine, right? Titus. Okay, sound doctrine preached and lived produces healthy churches. Okay, so some traits that I see, if you look at this with number 1, there are seasons of prayer for the unsaved. Okay, what do I mean by that? Well, it looks different in each church. But I mean unsaved by name. I don't mean simply just praying for the unsaved, but a list of unsaved by name. I learned much from godly deacons in my world, and I had, at this time, I think our church was about 17 people meeting in a nature museum, and this one of our first deacons came up to me. He wasn't a deacon at that time, and he called me preacher. He got saved later in life, and he was, if you could think of Colonel Sanders, this was the look-alike. In fact, I was eating breakfast with him one morning before cell phones, and we had somebody in the church suddenly die. My wife trying to locate me, and all she knew was I was at Hardee's, okay, eating a brisket, and she didn't know which Hardee's I was. So she just called and saying, "Do you see a guy that looks like Colonel Sanders?" So that's how they found me. So anyway, long story short, he came, "Preacher, you think God's ever going to use our little church?" I said, "Roger, I hope so." "Preacher, do you think God's ever going to use our little church?" "Well, Roger, yes." "Preacher." I said, "Roger, you got something, tell me what you're thinking." He says, "If we don't know how to pray and we don't set aside seasons of prayer, God's never going to use us to see souls saved." I said, what you got in mind? He said, well, I think we need to have a 24-hour prayer chain for 4 straight Saturdays. I said, okay, and how are we going to do that? We're going to divide up in 30-minute increments and ask people to volunteer to pray. I said, now, Roger, I don't have my calculator with me. 17 people, we need 48 slots, right? I mean, isn't that 24, 30, right, 30 minutes? I said, Roger, I don't know if we got enough people. I don't know how many people. He said, preacher. He said, now, Roger was diabetic and had heart trouble, so he was disabled. He can't do much, but I can pray. I'll take every slot somebody doesn't sign up for. Okay, so that was about 97. And I can tell you that changed the culture of our church. And every year we do it leading up to an evangelistic outreach. And anything good comes because we know how to pray or learn to pray by name of unsaved. People would submit, who are you praying for? And we have a list praying by name for the unsaved. Now, it looks different in different churches. I was with a church in Ohio, and this is what they did. They would open up their auditorium an hour early. And so for the next season, they had several needs. They needed a pastor. They needed to see people need unity in the church, needed to see souls saved. And they started and asked families, if you want to come just an hour early, and they thought, well, maybe they'll show up 15 minutes early. They had people showing up every Sunday an hour early to pray together as families at the church. So again, it looks different in different churches. But the question is, are we a praying church? I know as a pastor, several Wednesday nights, I said this, and the first time I said it offended people. I said, tonight we're taking no physical prayer requests. None. Only for the unsaved. And it offended people because, well, wait a minute. So-and-so, I said, okay, you can pray, just not tonight, for this next while. So it takes, because we get in these routines, do we not? So anyway, what I have seen, churches that seem to be healthy churches and growing churches, there are seasons of prayer specifically for the unsaved. So that's just an idea. Number 2, the senior pastor is actively involved in one-on-one ministry in the community. He sets the example for others to follow. Okay, now, how many of you have an extra 2 or 3 hours every week? None of us do, okay. But what I'm saying is there has to be an intentional thing on our part to get involved in the community in some way or fashion. I'm wired different than you. You're wired different than the guy next to you as far as meeting the community. But there's got to be a way you have unsaved people in your life. Because if you don't do it, how do you expect your people to do it? So if I ask you right now to write down 5 unsaved people in your life, could I do that? Could you do it? And we need to have that. The podcast I have listed here is with a guy named Jonathan Edwards. You may know Jonathan. How many of you have met Jonathan? I know Brother Kobe has. If you've met him, he'll tell you it's God's will for you to be in Utah. It's that simple. You need to come to Utah because he's a church planter in Utah. To my knowledge, this podcast I did with him, to my knowledge, he had the only town where his Baptist church was as large as the Mormon ward. You think about that in Utah. Why? He stayed in one place a long time. He found a way through, back then I think as he said is the Rush Limbaugh show, he had like a 1-minute blip every day during that time frame, radio. So what I'm saying, that worked for him. And he always introduced it with the same music or whatever it was, but he found ways. I think he was big into, I don't know, I know he was a pilot. I think if people need to get somewhere in a hurry, he would fly people somewhere. But anyway, he found his niche, plus horsemanship, if you know him. All I'm saying is, I'm not Jonathan Edwards, and I don't have those gift sets. But there are ways you can get involved in your community. So all I'm saying is, what is that? because the pastors that are in the community, the churches come in, there is a way they have connected with the community. Okay, so any comments on that? Because either you got great ideas or I just offended you because I told you to get out of your office. Ted?
You know my heart already very much on this with chaplaincy and fire, EMS, police work, all types of stuff.
Yep.
Open doors in our community.
As well as hospitals, in our local hospital, there wasn't a dedicated chaplain, but nurses. If you go to the hospital and you speak to nurses on the way in, and again, don't be offended what I'm going to say, but you look like a professional. You're not in your. Now, again, are there times you have to go to the hospital in sweats? Yeah. Okay. If you're a I've been in the hospital dressed all kind of ways, right? But on a purposeful visit, I'm going to be business casual. I'm going to speak to the nurses. I'm going to speak to the doctors. And I cannot tell you, even 2 weeks ago at our church in Rock Hill now, nurses called the church because they know we'll come and visit patients who are dying. So, but it's all about connecting in the community and speaking to people. How long does it take to speak to a nurse? Now, I got 2 nurse daughters, okay? Or 2 daughters that are nurses. So maybe, but I'm just saying, but even before they did that, does that make sense? So wherever you go, you need to make sure that you are meeting people and being nice to people. All right? Any other comments on this? All right? And the longer you stay in one place, either it's going to be a great advantage for you or a big disadvantage if you don't have a good reputation. Okay? All right, number 3. And a lot of this you already know. A percentage of missions money is designated for local church outreach. And the leadership uses the church, I call it a financial plan, I put budget here, to cast a vision to reach the community. Okay? Now, I think you recognize this guy. So Bruce and I did a podcast on this. And again, I mentioned Roger Everett. Let me mention another deacon in my life. A deacon came to me and said, Pastor, people will give to a vision. They're tired of giving to a budget. I said, what do you want? What do you mean? He said, what would you do if you had another $10,000? I said, I don't know. He said, what about if you had $50,000? Or when he says you, the church. Or if we had another $100,000. What would be your vision if somebody gave our church $250,000? He said, Mike, I got no idea. He said, okay, I'm challenging you. Before we present, I'd like to call it a financial, but before we do that, the people need to hear your heart of what you would like to see done if God gave us a lump sum of money. And we called it a financial plan. Now that's just, you can argue nuances there, but what I'm saying is people will give to a vision. All right, so let me ask you this. If you don't cast the vision for your church and the finances to go with it, who's going to do it? Okay? If you don't cast the vision. So 2 stories with this. After Mike told me this, and other churches do it as well, just took me a while to catch up. So we started doing this. We had an old maid in our church. When she died, I think she was 92, 93. She lived by herself, ate off frozen dinners until she was 87. And she went in an assisted living center, and the minute she started eating good cooking, she had a heart attack. Okay, she literally lived off frozen dinners all her life, didn't cook. But she looked at every financial statement, business meetings, she was on it. Okay? She would ask questions. She wanted to know where money went. So we developed this plan and put it out there. When she died, she left the church $95,000. You would not know she had $95,000 to her name. Okay. Another family, after this plan was done, they left the church $150,000. And both these people were very conscious stewards, and they knew where that money would go. Okay. Now, I'm not saying you do that in order to get estate gifts. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you do this to cast a vision for your church of what would happen if. Okay? And I think if you can do that, then you have the flexibility of being able to say, okay, my vision for this next year, talk about interns, young men. I would like to do an intern for this year. And therefore it's going to be in the financial plan. And you know, if this comes, or you know, you follow what I'm saying? But here's what I'm trying to say. Your burden for the community has got to be reflected in your financial plan or your budget. And if you're not devoting any money to local missions, who was it that said, I think somebody's already said this, why mission, we don't do missions in New York, we do it. Who said that? Mark, was that you? Anyway, some of the speakers said, maybe it's Bruce. But anyway, so are you doing any missions money for your own, right? What's Acts 1:8 say? Start where? And we'll talk about that later, yeah. So are you devoting any money for that? All right, everybody with me? You tired? You worn out? Okay, I know it's lunchtime, okay? You need to get more coffee, you need to stand up. This brother's standing, go get some. All right, you with me? All right, okay, I'm sorry, maybe this is, here we go. All right, look at the next one. Number 4, there's an active women's ministries. Most churches have more women than men. I don't know, I've been in about 100 churches, between 90 and 100, I lose count. I've been in 2 churches that have more men than women. 2. Usually it's about 60-40 in the churches I'm in that we go in and help. But there's an active women's ministries. The women's ministries are not necessarily programs or even Bible studies, but rather maintain focus on what? I hit this last night. Women helping women. Who's got that Titus passage? Who's teaching that? Which one? You are. Okay. There you go. Setting the table for you.
Thank you, brother.
When I say the next thing, I always have to quote my wife. Okay, so I'm going to quote my wife. My wife, her opinion of the pastor's wife is this. Every problem in our church started with women. They did. Because the husband was somewhat passive. She would take up that leadership role. And the common thread to many of the problems we faced in our church was started by women. And so we realized we had a gap there. We weren't doing Titus 2. We had women's Bible studies, but I'm talking about really meeting women where they are. We didn't have one at night for those that are working. You've got to have a active women's program. How many of you do a lot of counseling? Anybody? Okay. What percent of women? Say that again, brother? Okay. Ted?
Probably about 75.
Yeah, all right. Our world is 80%. So why in the world, if I have a hard time as a pastor finding an hour to talk to my wife one-on-one, why in the world am I going to sit in an office and talk to a woman? Okay, you with me? You know where this is going. Why would I do that? When I can train women, or not me, but there's training, or I can train the women. You with me? So I'm just saying, you heard these two, and it's saying, most of the counseling in your world is going to come from women. You need women equipped to help the women. Period. You say, well, my wife is homeschooling. She keeps a nursery every Sunday. She can't. I didn't say she had to do it. Okay? But there's got to be women helping women. Does that make sense? Yes? Questions, comments on that? Ideas on that? Brother Hope?
We have one another time on Sunday after our fellowship meal, and we divide up guys and girls.
All right, so what he's saying, he has a one another time after the Sunday fellowship meal. Can you expand on that a little bit for everybody?
Just that we divide up between guys and girls.
Right.
And it's been a great opportunity for some growing but younger believers in the Lord to minister to those groups.
Good.
We have women kind of creating relationships that would not happen without that time, I think.
Okay, so you may want to talk to him about the way they do that, but there's got to be something Because I mean, especially with young moms, those are, and then then you got the middle-aged women who are going through whatever crisis we men go through as well. So at every stage, every season of life, there are different needs. You need to have the women prepared to meet these women's needs. Does that make sense? Any other ideas or comments you want to say here? But this is vital, guys. I'm telling you, this is crucial. And we'll talk about the men in a minute. Anything else on that? Okay. Look at our next one here. Number 5. There is an intentional assimilation process that begins with the pastor's intro class or welcome class or whatever you want to call it. Newcomers are challenged spiritually and encouraged to join the church and become disciple makers, guests, or assigned to a disciple maker in the church to complete the discipleship material, however you want to do that. All right, so where this comes from is long before I met some of these guys that go to Arch. You know what haunted me every Sunday night? A guest would come in. Again, I don't do offerings well. I don't do invitations well. However you want to, I want God to work. There's that balance all face between wanting to give an invitation. What would haunt me on Sunday night and keep me awake was I didn't know the spiritual condition of a guest when they left. I lost sleep. And I said, I've got to find a way to connect. So I just started talking to pastors of all stripes, and I have my sister-in-law's husband is on staff at a mega church in Texas, and so we do vacation together. We'll discuss philosophy of ministry in a polite way because it's totally different, right? Okay, but they do know something about greeting people. I said, let me ask you a question, because they have 5,000 to 6,000 people through a weekend. I said, can you tell me how y'all do? How do you determine the spiritual status of first-time guests? He said, oh, it's a challenge. I'll tell you what we do. And he talked to me about these Connect cards. And I said, you do this for 7,000 people? He said, yeah, we still print bulletins because we want Connect cards in every bulletin. I said, talk to me. What do you do? So this is what I'm telling you here. I'm not an original guy. I borrowed something from somebody and asked their permission to do it, okay? So what I'm going to show you is simply something that really connected with me as I connected with people. All right, now you can choose to use it, but I'm just, and again, this is just me. But what I'm saying is I'm not the only guy that did this, okay? But here's a sample of a card, or 2 different cards. But it's simply, and it's a card, but here's what's going to happen. If you're going to go do something like this, you got to educate your church family on what you're doing before you do it. You always got to know why you do what you do. And then tell them we're going to try this for a season. If it doesn't work, we'll can it, okay? So what we did, I would stand up every Sunday morning and I would say the same thing. Because again, we're in an area, we're going to pray and prepare. We're going to pray. Lord, send those that need Christ, send those that need discipling into our church. And we're going to prepare. This is one of the ways we prepared. And I told our church family, so I took Sunday nights for about a month and explained what we're doing. I said, you hear me say the same thing every Sunday. We got these cards. I'll stand up and say, hey, my name is Marsh Fant. I'm the pastor here at Harvest Baptist Church. Thank you so much for coming. We have prayed that you would come. We're prepared, and we really want to thank you. We want you to have a bulletin so you can follow what the service is about in our church, and you can understand where we're going, and my sermon outlines in there. So if you didn't get a bulletin, raise your hand. Our ushers are ready. Okay, I mean, they're doing their best to get them. I said, and if you'd open the bulletin, we used a blue card. I said, if you pull out that blue card, I want to explain something. We're glad you're here, but we want to make sure you understand a couple of things about our church. The sermon is going to be preaching God's word. You remember, this sounds elementary, right? And you got to do it, but you got to do it every Sunday. And you got to tell your church family, I'm going to say this every Sunday. But there's a reason. Okay, so we believe as God's word is taught that there's a response to that. And if you look on the back of the card, there's several places you can respond. So today, I mean, if you have a decision to trust Christ today, please let us know and we'll talk to you what that is. But anyway, you can see, I said another thing we believe is the Bible will change your life. And if no one has ever done a one-on-one Bible study with you, we offer that to you. And there's a box for that. The third thing we believe is this: God answers prayer. And you got any prayer request, I promise you, every day that we're in the office, and that's 4 days a week, our church staff will gather and pray for your request every day. Every day we're going to pray for that. So please put that in. Okay, so now, all right, so we do that, right? So what's the first challenge you're going to have if you do something like this? Pardon me? Well, you do have to do it. You got to talk to your secretary. Now, look, I know you got something. This is going to be an insert in the bulletin every Sunday, and I was the interim at this Faith Baptist Church in Utah. They're printing 1,000 bulletins every Sunday. I said, ladies, I'll buy you donuts. I'll do whatever you want, but I cannot pastor without these cards. So we bought in donuts, and they got volunteers to come in just to stuff the cards in the bulletin. Okay. Now, all right. So what else you have to prepare for? How you going to get them back up? I said, I got this brilliant idea. I'll put a box in the back. So I put 2 boxes in the back. Didn't work. At that time, we had about 200 people. They got 2 cards back. I said, okay, we got to think through this. So we had a church meeting. What are we going to do? They said, let's move the offering to the end of the service and get the cards up at the end. And then if visitors can put it in the plates. I said, okay, now are you ready for that, church? Right? Are you ready in a Baptist church to take the offering at the very end of the service? Musicians, the ushers, are you ready? Counting team means you won't be counting the money during the sermon. Are you ready and willing to commit? You with me? And they said, let's do it. All right, so we changed the order of the service for one reason. Why? To get the cards back up. And that's when everything changed. And I can tell you, I don't have time. I'm going to give you one illustration. I may give you 2. But anyway, first thing is people put prayer requests down. Okay? Our church people put prayer requests. And you could look at them and say, how did it go this week on such and such? Because you know what the unexpected blessing was? The unity of the church staff. So, if you're a volunteer house cleaner at 9 o'clock every day during the week, we're praying. It brought tremendous unity to our staff. But anyway, so this one guy came in the church, and I came in on Tuesday, and our secretary would separate the cards from the decisions versus prayer requests, the ones I need to take care of. So decision, every box was checked. I said, good night. And he said, please call me as soon as possible. So this young man came in. We started at 11. He came in the church, 10 after 11, sat in the very back corner. Didn't see any response at the end of the message. He left through a side door, didn't meet him, anything. His card's there. Every box is checked. Please call me as soon as possible. So I called him. I said, hey, can we do lunch one day this week? He said, no. I need to come see you right now. Okay. Postponed staff meeting. He came in. I said, what's going on? He said, well, thanks for calling me. This coming Friday is the anniversary of my grandfather committing suicide. And I'm really struggling with that. And I said, look, I'm so sorry. He said, no, that's not the end of it. My father also committed suicide on that same day. And I said, okay. So he said, am I going to commit suicide this coming Friday? And by the way, what's the difference between Jesus and Buddha? I said, well, wait, how did you get here? He said, I'm a drunk. I go to AA in downtown, and I live with my aunt, and your church was right on the way to my aunt's house. And I figured a lot of Baptist churches start at 11 o'clock, so I just pulled in. Pray and do what? So God sent him in. And he said, I'm a drunk. I'm in AA. But I need to go back. I said, well, let's deal with Jesus and Buddha first. So it took about an hour and a half, went through it. And once he understood who Jesus was and he professed Christ, committing suicide wasn't even a discussion. You with me? So then we teamed this guy up in a church with a guy that also overcame alcohol. And they went through discipleship material, and he disappeared. Gone. What in the world? You pour your life into somebody, right? And boom, they don't even tell you they're gone. Well, he had to run in with his aunt. He went back to his home. And then about a year later, I get this call out of the blue. Pastor Fant, you don't know me. Do you remember so-and-so? I said, yeah. Can you please tell me where he is? Because his cell phone and nothing. He said, well, he passed away. I said, I'm so sorry. He said, can I ask you a question? what happened to him? I said, what do you mean? Well, he was a changed guy when he came back home. He said, the reason I'm asking is, I'm a Christian, and he's my cousin. I've been praying for him for years. And I said, well, your prayer was answered. He came to Christ. Okay, now, this young man entered the back door, went out the back door, never saw him. Even by his cousin's testimony, this young man got saved, and the card was the only way we knew God was doing anything in his life. You with me? So I don't know how you connect with your guest or even people in the church. But we have just found, and through talking to others, that this is what works in many churches. Maybe not yours, it is a way. But the question is, how do you know? When you put your head down on Sunday nights and you preach your heart out and you have prepared and and you've studied and you preach and you've prayed, how do you know what's really going on? Is there a way the people can respond to you? That's all this is. But pastors of growing churches that and I use growing healthy churches, they're finding a way to connect with those that come in. But you got to pray and prepare as though they'll come. Does that make sense? All right, any questions on this? And I'll send you a sample of the card if you want electronic copies. This is my email address, mfant@gfamissions.org, and I'll send it. I'll be happy to send you. You can just run them with the copying machine, whatever. Any questions on that? Because that's a lot. I kind of threw that. And if you've heard me, I've used this. If you've heard me speak before, this is one of the things I dwell on, because it just answered it's a huge answer in my life as a pastor. All right, any comments, any questions? All right, lunch is coming. Let's keep going. All right, fresh website, number 6, the front door for your community. The church website is not for your church, it is for your community. Can I say that again? All right, so 5 key areas. The website I listed yesterday is a key area of your ministry. Now, any of you follow Alliance Defending Freedom? Anybody follow that? Okay. By the way, they do have a church alliance where you can join, and they will defend you all the way up to the Supreme Court. I advise you, if you're doing active disciple making in your community, and you're involved in your community, and you're presenting the gospel a lot, so you don't get sued. If you do get sued, they'll protect you. But anyway, this is what they say about the website. It needs to be bold, okay, to 3 people. Your congregation, your statement of faith needs to be very clear of who you are. To your people, to your community, and then the courts will back you up. Can I say that again? This is Alliance Defending Freedom. Your website, your statement of faith. They don't advise putting your constitution on the website, but your statement of faith. And it needs to be clear and bold in those, and then to your congregation, to your community, of exactly who you are, and then they will back you up. Okay? Now, as you think through this, I know you can't see that, but there is a group called churchclarity.com. Now, please, or .org, excuse me. These are not your friends, okay? These are not your friends. This is a LGBTQ plus group, and they spend time on your website. And if you are unclear on the role of women in the church, if you're unclear on that and some other issues, they may send you in, and they may send someone in, join your church, and then turn around and sue you because you weren't clear. All right, church clarity. Again, these are not your friends. You understand this. So don't register your church on this website, is what I'm trying to say. So they go out, they actively, the church enforce the policies that are on the church's website. Because if you have policies there and you're not enforcing them, you're in trouble. For instance, they have a Find Church by LGBTQ score. We're doing this in San Francisco. So I just happened to do our friends at Hamilton Square Baptist Church, and boy, they had reviewed them. And they were clear, okay? Dr. Ennis at the time, and it was very clear, so they labeled him, notice, David Ennis is the pastor, he is a man, and he is white. And they are called an independent fundamental Baptist church. This is how they look at you, by your race and your gender, okay? Now, so you can't hide that, I know that. But they're very clear. They're non-affirming on their beliefs towards LGBTQ. Okay, so is your policy very clear? Because there are people out there looking. The other thing is, I don't want to take too much time on this, but they're non-egalitarian. They're complementarianisms. And they make it very clear. So this is Hamilton Square in San Francisco, which is in the heartbeat of all this. But they were very clear on their policies, on their website. So they were not in danger, okay? Now, this is, I don't know, this is not that church. This is First Baptist Church somewhere. I just wanted to show you that this church was unclear about non-affirming. But they weren't clear about it. So if you got a website, you may want to get somebody to do a review of your statement of faith. If you join Alliance Defending Freedom, they will do that. I think Christian Law Association may do it. There are groups that can help you do that other than ADF. I just know ADF is what tried how many? 9 or 11 cases before the Supreme Court. So I kind of like to be in their corner, or want them in my corner. It's kind of the way I look at it. So that's just something to keep your eye on. Now, as you go through this, there's also a current trend. So with all the social issues, and again, I'm getting this from Alliance Defending Freedom. This is my source. This is, okay, I'm not an authority. I'm not a lawyer. All right, but with so many current social issues coming up, how do you change your statement of faith for everyone? Okay? And they say you don't have to do that. What you do is write a positional paper, okay? Let the congregation pass it, vote on it, and post it on your website as a positional paper so you don't have to go back and tamper with your statement of faith for any new social issue that comes up that may not be one in 5 years. Okay, because you want your statement of faith, you don't want to have to be changing that, right, all the time. But some call it positional paper, some people call it white papers. And I can send you to the church website where they have some. But anyway, but just think through that. That's Alliance Defending Freedom. I think it's a good option because we don't want to go messing with a statement of faith all the time. Now, you need to keep it up to date, right? But you don't want to change it for every social issue, okay? And again, that's Alliance Defending Freedom's advice, right? Any clarifications on that if any of you have done this? Okay. Yes, sir.
Yeah, position papers, but we really did decidedly refrain from making them public outside of the congregation itself.
Okay.
You're advocating something that's quite a little bit different, and I'm just wondering.
Well, if it's an issue that you could get sued over, is what I'm saying. So what is your position on women in leadership?
Yeah.
Okay, now as long as your statement of faith says very clearly that pastors must be men, deacons must be, elders must be men, okay, or whatever the issue is, as long if it's a social issue that you could get sued over, I would put it on your website. But then again, we also know the internal papers, right? That just family talk. Okay, but you got to be very clear of who you are and what you believe. And again, I would, if it's a question like that, I'm calling Alliance. What about this? I'm calling Alliance Defending Freedom. That's just my go-to. So I don't want to advise you. I would advise you to join their church alliance and let them advise you. Yes.
Now, would there be a difference between a positional paper and, let's say, a resolution?
What's the resolution about?
Whatever issue.
As long as the congregation votes on it, it's my understanding it carries the power of a statement of faith. As long as it's made public, so people are aware of your position on social issues. For instance, abortion or something like that. If you want that publicly stated, you can do it in a position paper if you don't have it in your statement of faith. Okay? But again, this is where I'm just saying this is where I would defer to Alliance Defending Freedom. I don't want to advise you on that because this is their world, or CLA, all the time. All I'm trying to say is there's a positional paper you can do instead of changing your statement of faith, and that needs to be posted on your website. Does that make sense? I'm just trying to protect you, all right? But your website is crucial. Ted?
Have you ever seen anyone post on their websites that say we have positions on practice but not actually put them on the website, say we have in-house documentation stating our position?
I just think whatever it is, you need to be clear. I would be very careful. I'm not a lawyer. I can't advise you on that.
I was just wondering if you saw anyone that's done it.
Not, I've never,
Those things.
everybody that I have seen on this, if they write a paper, they post it. And it's posted for a reason, for clarity. Yeah. All right, for instance, I do a lot with the Wilds. The Wilds went through this, and there's an issue of creation. Okay, so the Wilds wrote a paper. This is the Wilds statement on six-day creation, and put it on their website. So you can do current things like that just to stay up, okay? Transgender camping policy. We had to put one on that. Because in Tim Lewis's great state of New Hampshire, they sent us a letter, I say us, I'm on the board, the Wilds. We want to know your transgender camping policy. Great, we don't have one. We got to have one. Alliance Defending Freedom, hello, we need your help. Okay. All right, we need to keep moving quickly. Yes.
I'm concerned about the issue of a resolution versus a position paper or something that's put in the articles as a statement of faith. My understanding of a resolution is that it's the opinion of the people at that moment, at that time, but it's non-binding afterwards.
Okay. Yeah, see, this is where Alliance Defending Freedom, that's where they can tell you. Yeah, and you're probably right. That's not my area to say resolution. I've just always heard positional paper versus resolution. I've never heard, you're the first one that's used that term, so you're probably right. That's the reason I'm just saying, be careful, be diligent, seek advice from someone like Alliance Defending Freedom. Does that make sense? Okay, good. All right, let's keep going. Next thing would be number 7, men are mentoring men. We got 9 minutes. Okay, men are mentoring men to teach and how to lead their families in the local church. Must be challenged and mentored to be loving leaders. That's against today's culture. The young men coming to your church oh man, I mean, the snowflake world, they don't want men to be men. And you've got to take this by the horn, in my opinion, because if you're not developing men to be men, loving leaders, and this isn't just me, and there's some great resources, all right? So just quickly, if you were to take some young men through a manly book, biblical manhood, what would you use? Quickly, just popcorn. Give me which books would you use? Have you done this? Kent Hughes, right? This was a godly man would be one. Another.
Godly husband, I can't remember who that was.
It's either Lou Priolo,
Yes.
Stuart Scott, one of the two. Yeah. Mark Chansky, Manly Dominion. Mark Chansky. Anybody else? Anything got another one? But you've got to do this. This is part of mentoring young men. And especially, you just heard the call to the ministry. You just heard Bruce of Coming Shore. You've got to develop male leadership in your church. So I got news for you. You're going to die or you're going to retire. Right? And you got to have male leadership in the church. In fact, there was a church that called us about sending an interim in. It's one of the few times I refused. No. You've got 3 ordained men in the church and you got 3 godly deacons. Why in the world would we send an interim pastor into you when you've got, right? So, and we never thought, it's been developed, right? And I said, you're in a luxury position. Use it. You got to develop, right? Any comments on that?
One of the things that we've just started doing, we have a third service on Sunday.
Right.
We have an evening service. And we just found that preaching 3-hour-long messages in a row starts to, people can't handle that third service. So we use that as a real practical time. Something we've done this quarter is called what I'm calling generational discipleship.
Okay.
So the men would break up, and we have a topic for that week. We do a short 5-minute conversation, but then we pair up a younger man with an older man.
Yeah.
The first week I said, older men, tell the younger men how you've loved and cherished your wives.
Good. Yep.
Or tell them about your prayer life.
You got something intentional going on. Yeah.
Instigated those
Sure.
conversations has been very, very fruitful.
Good. All right, any other ideas on that? Okay, let's go to the next one. Members are equipped in doing ministry. Hello, that's what you were just talking about. Okay. Disciple making does not fall exclusively on the pastor, deacons, and staff. Equip disciples of kingdom making disciples. Just as our brother said, they take that extra service to do that. Okay. And many of you, you could do a whole thing on that. Let me go back to the men thing. This is just my experience. The term passive men, they're not passive. They've made a decision not to be engaged. Okay, so let me say that. But I'm still going to use the phrase passive men. And my experience with them, again, is we realized those are the families that we had the most trouble discipling. Okay. I've forgotten who. I got advice from. I wish I knew who to give credit to. But anyway, what I found that worked from the advice of somebody else, I would meet with 3 of them at a time. And we would go through manly dominion. And I'd have one of them teach the next chapter. Because there's something about one-on-one, it got like, I am in your face. But something about with this dynamic of 3 other people and me, I know we'll forget. So I said, okay, man, let's talk about where we're vulnerable. What are you scared of? One guy said, Pastor, I'm scared to death you're going to call on me to pray, and I'm not, I can't do it. I said, I'll never do that. When have I ever called randomly on somebody to pray for the congregation, especially on Sunday, And I said, he said, okay, all right. Well, I need to overcome that. All right, so the next Sunday, and so we all prayed together to help us overcome. So the next Sunday, the way the ushers come down is who's praying for the offering. This guy's named Eric. He's about 6'4", and he's like a big teddy bear. So anyway, so the one coming down the left center aisle, my left, is the one that gets the microphone and prays. So I saw right before the offering, Eric switched to that position. And we had just prayed this that Friday. And I'm sitting there, what in the world? So he comes down, he couldn't even look up at me. I said, Eric, would you please lead us in prayer for the offering? And he prayed. And the 4 of us, the other 3 that were in that meeting, it was hallelujah time. And so I said, Eric, what happened? He said, I had to punch it in the nose. But see, with the other men there, it encouraged him. I'm telling you, his wife's a piece of work. Hope she's not listening to this. All right. Can I come this way? So he never could lead the family, or he never was willing to do the battle to lead the family, right? Because it was going to be a battle. So I'm saying, if you have men like that in the church, it may be good to take 2 of them and maybe you just to do it. Anyway, that's just a thought. Because it was a big victory to see him be able to do that. Okay? All right, last thing. Preaching is expository and practical, strong enough to help people grow, but simple enough for new believers to understand. And again, there's this podcast, which I mentioned last night. So when we started this series on preparing to preach, so again, the idea was not with mine. John Crocker, our executive director, wanted me to do it on preaching. So we started thinking, I said, okay, how can we do a podcast? So if I interviewed somebody on a book, I have the same questions. Why did you preach this book? We're trying to cover all the genres. But anyway, so we started the series with this: Pastor as Preacher. And many of you know Mark Minnick. I got him to do the podcast. Men, we are preachers. Yes, we're under shepherds. And that's so much what Titus is about. But we cannot forget we're preachers. You devote hours of your study to preaching. So I want us to walk away here encouraged that God's Word is alive and powerful. And if somebody had told me when I was in the business world that a church would support me to study it, They would support me and pay me and my family to sit down and study the Bible, to prepare to preach. It's a privilege, man. Preaching is a privilege. But you are a preacher. And I love the way Chuck Phelps puts it. Sunday morning is the bottom shelf of your theology. Okay? And I did a podcast with Chuck on this. I think I know. And then, so Sunday morning has got to be that expository preaching that everyone can understand. Okay? It has to be. If you're praying and preparing, now I understand maybe your philosophy Sunday morning is not, this really not for guests. Okay? I don't know. But are you prepared for everyone that walks in? Can a sixth grader understand most of your message? In our world, third graders were in our service. So, you got to understand, can your preaching as well as those who have studied the Bible all their life? And we know that's a challenge, right? But we know God is able. But I just want to end with this. If your preaching has got to be reaching the heart of the people. And the way it reaches the heart of the people is you spend time with your sheep so you know where they're struggling. And you spend time in the community so your burden for the lost is continually before you.